I hope you can all see that. If not, go right to the church so you can watch it there. While we're waiting, Ohio State women are leading 64-51 over UConn in the Elite Eight.
Be here. We have a special event this afternoon called our Regional Gem Program, which I'll tell you about a little bit more in just a little bit. But first, on behalf of the Storytelling Association of California, we want to thank Pastor Aaron for making this possible, for making room for us here, for having the recording going, for being able to share this wonderful event with many, many people. And Pastor Aaron, I'm going to ask you to come up here, please. This is... for this beautiful, beautiful space. This is for you.
I just want to say it is our honor to be able to host you guys today, and really just a blessing to be able to hear the importance of storytelling. It is so important to listen to one another's stories, and so we are grateful for the storytelling that you do and for bringing this opportunity to us here, and we're so excited to celebrate Anne and to hear some stories today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to tell you a tiny bit about our Regional Gem Program. This has been a part of Storytelling Association of California for a number of years. And the idea is to honor a storyteller who not only is a brilliant storyteller, but someone who has really worked hard to promote the art of storytelling in her or his community. Throughout the state, now throughout the world, we have the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to name our regional gems and then introduce this year's honoree. We started with Catherine Fairley, who's no longer with us, as just a beautiful storyteller. Then Kirk Waller, whom I believe is on screen, Tim Araneta, Marilyn McPhee, I'm telling it out of order. Marilyn McPhee, who is here with us, Barbara Clark, who's here with us, Michael McCarty, who's here with us, Joy Swift, who I believe is on screen. Who am I forgetting? Tim Araneta? Beezy Smith. And today, we get to add to our list of luminaries Ann Buxey, who many of you know. We alternate between Southern California and Northern California on the different years, and this year, it's Southern California. So Ann Buxey is our 2023 Regional Gem Award winner. We're so excited to be here. So we want to present you with this plaque, the 2023 Regional Gem Award, and we want you to have these flowers as well. Those are very heavy.
Beautiful. Someone took a good picture too. Tina, thank
I want to read this. I'd like to read this to folks, if you don't mind.
you. No.
With gratitude, appreciation, and recognition of her many years of service to the storytelling community of Southern California, as poet, storyteller, and host of the long-running quarterly Tales by the Sea showcase, the Storytelling Association of California honors Ann Buxey. Ann, from the time you started hosting storytelling concerts in your home, feeding ever-growing audiences with stories, music, poetry, and hot homemade soup. You brought joy and fellowship to hundreds. Seth thanks you for keeping the storytelling fire alive. Thank you so much. So without further ado, Ann Buxey, Regional Jam 2023.
Well, I'm going to tell some stories today about me as a married person. And the first one is called Found, or sometimes known as Sometimes You Find What You Need. We'll let a couple people in now. Really, I wasn't looking for a husband. I was looking for a job. It was 1970. I just graduated from college in Claremont, California. My husband-to-be had just been discharged from the Army. Thanks to the Neighborhood Youth Corps, he was working at LA County in the Personnel Division, where a Black Vietnam vet meets fresh out of college girl from a small town in Arizona. Have you ever met someone with a face that cares, that absorbs you without ulterior motive? A face that's taken life in and gentled it. I don't know what Rick had gentled, and I don't know what it had cost him to be the man he was at 23, but it was there on his face and in his actions. He was the only county employee to come out from behind that counter and mix with us, the job-seeking public. Over the course of a few visits, we got to know each other. On one of those visits, he invited me to Venice Beach with a bottle of Akadama plum wine. And he suggested we move in together. And I agreed. Was I thinking about my future? About the consequences of an interracial relationship? Not really. This was my future. Call me naive or ignorant, but I'd never been exposed to racism. Not in Yuma, not by my folks. I heard Mom use a phrase once, man's inhumanity to man, but I'd never witnessed it. It had never touched my skin. There were times when Rick and I were together, we'd pass some sisters, and I'd feel hostility. A white girl with an eligible black man, I wasn't supposed to do that. But by the end of that month, we were moving my stuff out of that single unit in West LA to a one-bedroom apartment in Leimert Park. I'd drive to work in Westwood, and I'd often wonder how long it would take before I was not so aware of the color divide between me and my environment. And it took about 30 years to see past the glare and the suspicion of a color-intoxicated culture. Now in 1970, was it 70? Oh, it was 1973, we decided to make it official. Rick and I married in the preacher's backyard in Baldwin Hills. They say perspective takes two pairs of eyes. With 4 eyes, you can see around a problem. I knew Rick could help me see around the rest of my life. I I trusted his goodness, so we stepped into each other's families. Bingo, I now had a slew of aunts and uncles and a pack of cousins. We grew to know each other gradually. I rode to church with Uncle Freddie one day. He owned a couple tire shops, and he was reminiscing. He said, I decided to be a wholesaler, but a white man called, advised me against it. I was beginning to see what racism could accomplish. Its inhumanity. By 1980, we were living in Silver Lake. Rick had quit his $1.25 an hour job at the county. He was a working artist now. 1980, we had our only child, a daughter. And I began a campaign to move. I hadn't been raised in smog. I didn't want to raise our daughter in air you could see. Every morning I call the Air Quality Management District for a pollution report. Most every morning that meant I'd be shutting up the house, closing windows. Rick said, you were a nuisance, but you were a sincere nuisance. My body is just buzzing with this. You were a sincere nuisance. Now I lost my place. Isn't that something? I need Tina to give me a hint like it did when we were telling these stories. Well, Rick was a working artist now. He came home from the studio one day, and I said, we're moving. And he remembered a place he never wanted to leave. It was 1968. He and a gaggle of other young conscripts were being bussed up north, Pacific Coast Highway, to Fort Ord for basic training. So I was being bussed up north for basic training. I'm sorry, I'm getting very buzzed.
Low to go.
Yes, Michael, right.
We're loving your story.
Well, there's more to it.
Soon come.
Yeah,
Just talk to us, Ann. We
yes,
just love you.
thanks, Ellen. So he looked out the bus window. On one side was the ocean, on the other, an empty field, mountains, a few homes. He thought, this is where I want to live. Don't tell me land can't call you back. 15 years later, Rick found a place for us on that piece of land in Malibu. Am I glad we moved here? The air was cleaner most of the time. I hadn't counted on how monochromatic Malibu was. Jill came home from elementary school one day, lay on the bed crying. What's wrong, Jill? What happened? All she'd say is, you wouldn't understand. You're not black. Not black. Well, there was a color divide again, right in the heart of our family. Now, early on in our marriage, I noticed how Rick managed his public exposure. I like going to live events, storytelling, poetry, theater. Not Rick. If he had his brothers, he'd always prefer the company of his lifelong buddies, his cousins, or himself. With them, it was a safety zone, a DMZ. He'd always encourage me to go, but I knew it'd be a solo outing. There were times we were together. My folks had a dinner party for us once. Many of their friends and business associates were there. After the party, Dad said, "Rick, I noticed that you can talk to anybody about anything. That's remarkable." Rick told my dad, "Don, I'm just faking it." Dad said, "That's what's so remarkable." Interesting. Now, Jill must have been 9 or 10 at the time. I thought, we need a family vacation. So I planned one, a raft trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. My idea of heaven. Less so for Rick. It was 126 one day. The river was in the 40s. Our first night out, we camped right by a rapid. Our first rapid, the one we would run the next morning, the one our guides had talked about, where a raft had overturned the week before. All night that rapid was talking to Rick. All night he was planning, how could I save Jill? It wasn't until the end of that week, back in our hotel room, safe, when I noticed Rick's beard. It had begun turning gray. He said, when your balls are in somebody else's grip, you want to make sure they like you. But what could he do? I mean, rapids will be rapids. Then Jill piped up. Your vacations aren't vacations, Mom. You can't relax. Rick was 50 when he had heart surgery. That changed the nature of our relationship, how we leaned into each other. Rick had admitted, I'm a victim of my own eccentricities. After that surgery, he began what he called a dive into who I am. And so did I. I enrolled in graduate school. The rhythm of our marriage seemed to be composed of our adjustments to each other's dives and eccentricities. One thing we always enjoyed together was art. Making it, viewing it, discussing it. We'd stretch out rolls of canvas outside and begin, as Rick said, smearing paint. He might pass by my work occasionally and comment, needs more work. He never told me what to do, just do more. Kind of like expecting to find justice in the world, needs more work. I trusted his vision, so I kept at it. He told a friend of ours once, when describing our marriage, we've been on every ride in the carnival. But with 4 eyes, we've managed to know when to zig and when to zag. And we've kept believing in each other and in ourselves. At day's end, we might sit out under the palms, listen to the wind, watch the night absorb the light. Under the stars, in that quiet, we let the conversation wander where it will. In the face of those good nights, no matter how thin the day or how thick with trouble, we find what we need. We are gentled. This next story is about me and my in-laws. Over 30 years ago, it's called the Fitting Rooms. Over 30 years ago, I went to Bristow, Oklahoma for my in-laws' family reunion. Bristow's where they were all born. It's a town of about 4,500. It seemed as if everyone, at least in the African-American community, knew them, the Jacksons. Heard tell Bristow used to be called Jacksonville. Back when, those Jacksons were known as the Blue Hen Chicks. My mother-in-law told me that, and I asked her, Lula, what does that mean? Well, she didn't know. After she passed, I thought I'd try and find out. So I sat at the computer, called up the search engine, typed 3 words in the search bar: blue hen chicks. Bingo. I hit pay dirt. Evidently, that phrase arose over 200 years ago in the Revolutionary War. It gathered its meaning from a Captain Jonathan Caldwell. Caldwell commanded a company of men from Kent County, Delaware, but he also raised gamecocks, fighting chickens. Cockfighting was high entertainment then. Kind of like football today, I guess. But those roosters fought to the death. Now, Caldwell's cocks were famous for winning fights. They were fierce, and he always maintained that no cock could be truly game unless it was brooded by a blue hen. Caldwell became that blue hen to his troops. He trained them to be fierce, to fight to the end. So when those Jacksons were called blue hen chicks, it might make you pause. They were a flock to be reckoned. They knew their worth. They stood their ground. 3 things I noticed and I remember about Bristow. The color of the earth, fiery red. Churches, there was one in almost every neighborhood. And the corner gas station. The corner gas station sold watermelons, sweetest ones I ever tasted. I ate so much one day, it made me tipsy. I started chanting, I am a watermelon, I am a watermelon. Watermelons are happy creatures. And I ate so much watermelon to distract myself from the other goodies. The pound cake, the 7-Up cake, the coconut cake, the German chocolate cake, the upside down cake, and the cobblers.
Oh,
Yeah, of course now I wish I could get my mouth on one of those cobblers. Homemade cobblers. Or Uncle Jim's barbecue. When he fired up that 55-gallon drum, people began showing up, as if the aroma was invitation enough. And we'd sit out in the shade, hoping to catch a breeze off the pond. After the eating and the swapping of stories and the sharing of memories, Aunt Jean and my mother-in-law Lula and I might ride to Sapulpa for some window shopping. That's how I found myself one day in a most unlikely place. A lingerie shop? But something red and lacy in the window caught my eye. I thought, why not? My daughter's voice in my ear, live a little, Mom. So in we went, and there were worlds of laces. Black, red, hot pink. I finally found a bra. A sales lady showed me to a fitting room. I took off my top and tried it on. I tried to try it on. It was way harder than bridling a horse. Then the sales lady knocked. Could I help you? Yes, please, come on in, I said. I'm having trouble figuring out how to fasten this. She came in, looked at me, and had 4 words. This is a garter. Well, no wonder, I said. That explains it. Thank you. She left, and I muttered to myself, really? Am I supposed to know this is a garter just because I'm female? No. Right then, I decided lingerie was too complicated. I would stick to underpants. But before that, over 40 years ago, I entered another fitting room when I married Rick, the fitting room of my marriage. I was 25. I had my ways. I suspected I needed some alterations, had a few loose ends. When I was angry, I would scream at Rick. His response was always the same. Silence. I mean, utter silence. He'd barely look at me. I might not know the difference between a bra and a garter, but I knew I had to find another way of communicating. So I did. But I also had opinions when I married Rick about this country. I thought the United States was the good guy, that we were always right. In this fitting room, with all my new in-laws, I was beginning to see things differently. They might not have known it, but they were all helping with my alterations, helping me find a truer fit in my life. There was Uncle Freddie. Our daughter must have been about 3 at the time. She and I went over to Aunt Jean's one Sunday. We were going to ride to church with him. We're dressed in our Sunday best. In walks Uncle Freddie, all 6.5 feet of him in his Sunday best, from tip to toe. Now, I don't think our daughter had ever seen shoes like the ones Uncle Freddie was wearing.